Hello, builders of good. Thank you for tuning in to the BuildGood Fundraising podcast. Fundraising isn't easy, but it should be simple. So on this show, we take the mystery out of raising money. Now, on every episode, we coach you how to build your fundraising like a flywheel. The flywheel has 5 steps. Number 1, listening to donors. Number 2, engaging them. Number 3 is asking the right people for the right things. Number 4 is celebrating every gift. And number 5 is reporting back in a responsive and real-time way. And if you master the 5 parts of the flywheel, your fundraising flywheel will start to spin reliably with less effort on your part. Your revenue will grow, and so will your career. Now, every week we focus on one part of the flywheel, and today we're kind of focusing on building the flywheel by making a plan for the year. I'm here with Caitlin Padani, fundraising strategist at BuildGood. Hi, Caitlin.
Hello. So good to be here.
This is your podcast debut in terms of being a guest.
I'm a little bit excited. It's time. I get to hear the flywheel spiel in person. It's wonderful.
Right. Now we are kicking off the year 2024. If you're listening like 2 or 3 years from now, I hope you are. I hope this podcast is still around and you're in the back catalog of the episodes. But we're at the beginning of the year 2024. And we're focusing today on planning for the year. And it's actually a 2-part series. Today, we're going to talk about how to make a quick plan for the year. And in our next episode, we're going to talk about the budgeting and projections and what that looks like. So let's start here, Caitlin. Typically, when we're planning, we're looking ahead. You, however, run the Fundraising Academy, which is our coaching and training program for small and medium-sized nonprofits. And you're very fond of actually starting by looking back. Can you say a little bit more about that?
I love the opportunity to start by looking back, especially when we can look back at some of our wins. Our brains are wired to want to find negativity and to see all of the things that are really hard. And so every chance we have to look back and to give our brains a little bit of exercise and build some of that brain muscle neural pathways to see what are the things that went well. It's such a helpful experience for us as we head into our work.
We just finished this thing called the Preloaded Year in the Fundraising Academy. And you led a bunch of organizations who are in the academy. You led them through this exercise, through the Preloaded Year. And you started by having them look back by doing something called the New Year Reset. And these are 5 questions that you can ask yourself before planning ahead. These are 5 questions you can ask yourself. And what are these 5 questions?
Yes. So let's run through them. What are you proud of from last year? What do you want to do more of this year? And so this is where we start looking forward to the things that happened last year and then also where things are going this year. So what do you want to do more of this year? What do you want to do less of this year? What are the things that you can confidently say no to this year? What are the most important events on your calendar? Calling those out at the beginning of the year and being able to say, these are the things that are non-movable. That's super helpful. And then how do you want your donors to feel this time next year? We talk a lot in the Fundraising Academy about beginning with the end in mind. And so if we can get into the mind of how someone feels giving to our organization this time next year, then we can start to build a plan backwards. So these questions can give us just a foundation, a starting point, so that we know that all of the most important things are in place before we start putting in the details of what our plan looks like for the upcoming year.
Got it. So the 5 questions are: what are you most proud of from last year? What do you want to do more of this year? What do you want to do less of this year? What are the most important events in your calendar? And how do you want donors to feel this time next year? All right, I got to ask, what do you want to do like less of this year? Why is this such an important question to ask yourself?
In fundraising, things can get really, really busy, and we can get so caught up in the things that don't matter as much. And so if we can just call it the things we want to do less of, and if you can have those on a sticky note of these are the things that matter less this year, it can provide such a solid foundation. You've probably heard of the idea of the big rock theory. So if we think of a big jar, And there's three things we need to put in it. There's some large rocks, there's some smaller pebbles, and then there's sand. If we put it into the jar, sand first, the sand takes up space and then pebbles, and then there's not enough room to fit all the rocks in the top. If you search big rocks, you can see an image and it makes a little bit more sense. But if you put in the big rocks first and then the pebbles and then the sand, somehow it all fits together. And so as we think about our time and we think about what fundraising looks like, um, identifying what those big rocks are, make sure that we can put those into the calendar first and that they are non-movable so that the smaller things, sometimes those are the shinier things, don't take up as much time. And so when I think of big rocks for fundraising, I think of what are your asks? When are those happening throughout the year? And ideally, probably starting with year end, because we know, for better or for worse, 30% of income comes in at year end for so many organizations. And so we know that that's a really important big rock to get in there. And then other asks throughout the year, maybe you have a gala, and then getting some of those smaller pebbles in there. And if fundraising, a pebble could be some of a donor survey that you're doing or some other way that you're running the flywheel to be able to connect with donors. And then there's the sand, which is the smaller pieces. And so when we think about what do we want to do less of this year, I think it's important to start with those big pieces. What are the things that are really going to get you momentum on your flywheel? What are the things that are really going to turn it in one direction and not keep you going back and forth on the
Love it.
flywheel?
Yeah. So identifying the things that you can give yourself permission to not do as much this year, and
Mhm.
starting with the things that are non-movable, non-negotiable, the big things, the events that are already on the calendar, and the things you want to do more of this year. So sometimes the sand, which is like the last thing that goes in the jar, feels like rocks inside, like internally. Sometimes it's like, oh no, that's actually sand. That's not a rock. So this sheet actually helps you sort of visualize what are the really important things. And I love that you ended with how do I want donors to feel at the end of the year? If we know that, then well, the rocks should be contributing to that feeling. If we know what the end is, I want donors to feel valued, connected, like they're part of the team. Well, then your rocks should point toward that to make that happen, and the rest is just pebbles and sand. Where can people find this sheet?
We have it on our website. We have a link in the show notes that you can grab. And I've always wanted to say a link in the show notes. So now I got to say it, that you can grab this, download this sheet here. And if you want to have questions, I'm a paper and pen person. I love being able to print something out and write it down. So that's a great option there.
All right, so we've got the New Year reset. We filled out those 5 questions. Now let's get into the preloaded year.
Mhm.
Before we do, there's some first principles.
We love first principles. Could you share some of the first principles that we look at when we think of what does the preloaded year look like?
Yeah, so we love first principles. A first principle is basically a truth that everything goes back to. If you distill something to its essence, what is the truth behind it? And your tactics might change and your strategy might change. But if you've defined what your first principles are, then that is a true north for you to have. So we create first principles for everything. So we had 5 questions for the New Year reset. We also have 5 first principles of the preloaded year. And partially, this is where you find out why it's called the preloaded year. But the first principle is that cash flow follows calendar. So when you look at your calendar, let's say you've created the plan for the year and you look at your calendar, if you've got nothing planned for June and July and August, because people have told you don't fundraise in the summer, well, you're not going to have a lot of cash flow in the summer. You're going to be able to look at your calendar and just see like, oh, okay, the periods where I'm actually connecting with donors, asking them to step into a problem or help fix something or be engaged or involved somehow, those are the periods of the year where more likely than not, supporters are going to be giving and contributing, whether that's time, talent, treasure, whatever it is. So cash flow always follows calendar. Look at your calendar and you should be able to see what kind of year you're going to have.
Okay, so cash flow follows calendar. What's next?
Number 2 is where your attention goes the money flows. And this is a little bit like cash flow follows calendar, but it's more so about where you are going to spend your time, the places where you're going to apply your focus. Those are the activities, the strategies, the tactics, the events, whatever it is, that are going to result in money coming in the door. If you don't touch monthly giving whatsoever, like you maybe spend 4 hours per year thinking about monthly giving probably is not going to grow. But if in your calendar, there's all these like different things where you're like working on monthly giving, doing monthly giving conversion, calling donors to ask them if they would consider becoming a monthly gift and the value of a monthly giver. Well, if you put your attention on those things, chances are you're going to get better results. So, where you decide to place your attention and your focus, which is actually the most precious asset you have internally, is the focus and attention of your team members. So wherever your attention goes, the money flows.
Okay, so I love this principle, but in the Fundraising Academy, we talk to people all the time who are from all different size shops. And sometimes it's so hard to keep attention on something and even to keep something in your calendar. I'm curious if you have any ideas around how can someone keep something on a calendar. So let's say they want to think about monthly giving and they want it to be on their calendar and they want to make this a priority in this coming year. But the whirlwind of all of the things, it's like a sandstorm out there. All the sand is
Yeah.
blowing around. What can they do to make that, I don't know, to make that a priority?
Yeah, I think you just have to give yourself permission to say there are seasons of maintenance and there are seasons of growth. And oftentimes, if it's going to be a season of growth for one thing, it probably means it's going to be a season of maintenance for another thing. Just yesterday, I got an email from one of our listeners who's retiring in January. And I had sent an email to all of our lists and I said, "Hey, how was your year end fundraising? Like, hit reply and let me know. I'd love to hear it." And he replied back with, and he said, major gift fundraising was down this year, but that's because I'm a solo fundraiser. I'm the only fundraiser in this shop. And I focused all my attention on legacy gifts after attending a webinar that BuildGood had done with one of our clients on legacy giving. And he said, and I did that for a whole year, and it's actually starting to pay off. Like I'm actually getting commitments from people who are going to leave a gift in their will. But that also meant that I didn't focus as much on major gifts, so my major gift is down. And he wasn't saying that in any negative way. It was just like the reality of it. Very proud to have grown the legacy, like gifts and wills pipeline. And it came at a bit of a cost in terms of major gifts. So I think that's okay. That's why it's so important to decide what you want to do more of this year and what you want to do less of this year, and to define what is your priority for the year, because where your attention goes, the money flows.
I love it. Okay, what's the next principle?
This is why it's called the preloaded year, because principle number 3 is to front load your thinking. We've all been in this situation, which is we kind of know what we want to do for the year. The thing is coming up, and then we book a meeting to talk about it. Then we book a follow-up meeting to talk about it. And then this other thing came up, and then we book a third meeting. And we spend so much time planning and thinking about the thing instead of just like doing the thing. And if thinking is super important, but how about we front load it at the beginning of the year? And as much as possible, plan out the year, have all those arguments and discussions, and like come to an agreement to what we're going to do. And then, disagree and commit, even if we're not entirely like sold on something that somebody on the team wants to do. Let's front load all the thinking. And the places where we do disagree, let's try to find agreement. And if we close to agreement, let's just say that's okay. Maybe not the way I would do it. But instead of when this thing comes up in the calendar, us arguing about it again, we're just going to like say it's okay to disagree and just commit. This is the plan that we made. As best as we can, we're going to follow it. We don't have to be super rigid about it. Of course, things change and we want to be nimble and reactive. But let's just spend a little bit of time at the beginning of the year in January, right now, doing all the thinking and preloading of as much of it as possible. And we can all breathe and go and just like take big action and default to action and just execute.
because all of those decisions are made, all of that heavy brain power, all that deciding power has been done. So we can just jump into action. Okay, so that was number 3. What about number 4?
Number 4 is start with your non-negotiables. This is your rocks. The things that, whether you love them or hate them, it's a non-negotiable. The gala is often a non-negotiable. I think you as a fundraiser should have some non-negotiables. Like if things are working really well and donors seem to love them, I think that that should be or has potential to be a non-negotiable. But start with those things, put those in the calendar, create the plan around those things.
Okay. First principle, number 5, the last one
The last one
of the preloaded year.
is like all fundraising, simple, not easy, which is just work the plan. You've got a plan, now just work it. Focus on working it. The rest of the year, your job is not to challenge the plan necessarily. I'm not saying you just blindly follow it, but if you've all got some sort of agreement, your job is to execute and to get those reps in and to just like consistently over time execute against the plan. And a year is not that long. You can course correct. Like if something happened during the year that didn't work, you can course correct the next year. A year is not that long. So just commit to doing it for a year and just see what happens. Start spinning the flywheel, see what happens. See if there's enough signals coming back to you that things are working. Just work the plan and take massive action against it. That's actually the only thing at the end of the day like that makes a difference. If there is a major gift fundraiser who makes 5 phone calls a day versus somebody who makes 2 phone calls per day, I don't think we can predict who will be more successful in a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. But over the course of a year, the person making 5 phone calls per year is increasing their surface area of luck. Like they're just like increasing the space where good things can happen because they're just executing consistently against the plan.
I love that. Sort of have a picture of compound interest just growing and growing in fundraising, which is beautiful.
Mm.
Because in a year, you see great results. You might not in a month, but if you are able to look back and you're going in the right direction, then you have a beautiful pool of action that you get to pull from, that you get to see and enjoy. And
Yeah.
the people your donors are benefiting from and the people who you're serving as an organization are also benefiting from. So it creates these beautiful benefits for everyone involved in the organization.
Yeah, when you work the plan and you have some confidence that you have a good plan, like don't get me wrong, like a bad plan will obviously result in bad results. But you know this very well, Caitlin. We signed a client 2 years ago and the file was in decline. We created a plan around the flywheel and we started just executing against it. And year one, there wasn't that many signals. It was like the file was still bleeding, but it started to by the end of the year it started to level off. Like it wasn't like free fall anymore. 2 years in, we just had the best year end ever with that client, but it took 2 years of consistently like spinning the flywheel, listening, engaging, asking, celebrating, reporting. It took 2 years for that to turn around and to now all of a sudden have an overnight success, which was actually like 2 years in the making. But most of the time, like good fundraising is not built on fads, but it's built on habits. And, if you just keep at it with those healthy habits, you can't help but grow because healthy things grow.
And that's what I love about the flywheel imagery, because it really is forward momentum in one direction. Small pushes. I always picture when I think of the flywheel, the thing at the park that my kids like to play on that spins around like a merry-go-round kind of thing. And as long as you're going in one direction, you're going to get momentum. And eventually it's going to get up to a good speed. And I think in organizations, so often it's hard to go in one direction because it's boring and it's hard to just make a plan and stick to it and keep going around and around. But when we think of the flywheel, we're seeing with these organizations, 1-2 years in, there is that momentum. The first year feels hard because you're going from nothing or you're having to change directions. But what happens, and I think I see in a lot of organizations, is they go in one direction and then they stop and then they turn and then they go back in the other direction. And that's why they're never seeing momentum, because they're not just taking those small steps. They're not working the plan towards consistent,
Mhm.
boring results in one direction, but that momentum really takes organizations into a beautiful place where it feels really good in their shop, where they feel like they're doing the right things and they feel like it's a little bit easier. It's less stressful, and also the money follows.
Yeah, what I love what you said about that spinning things for kids. It kind of looks like a Christmas tree and a merry-go-round if you put them together, right? It's kind of this like a cone situation that just like spins really quickly. If you think about getting that spinning, it is very hard to spin it at the beginning. There's like 10 kids on there. It's kind of heavy. The hardest part is getting it spinning. And when you quit before it's up to speed, like you've broken the compounding and it's going to slow down. And to start it back up is going to be a lot of work again. So what you're doing by breaking the compounding is you're just staying stuck in the hardest part over and over and over, rather than pushing through until you have momentum and it gets easier. And then maintaining that thing in momentum, like you can do it with a finger or two, right? You can just kind of like flick it and it stays in motion. So don't give up if after a few months or even after a year, things aren't quite where you want them to be. It's about consistency over time. For people who don't know the flywheel, I mean, we talk about it a lot, but do you want to give us a very quick rundown of like what could some activities be? So we've got the five
Mhm.
questions for the New Year reset. We've got five first principles of the preloaded year, and now we've got five parts of the fundraising flywheel. Do you want to just very quickly run us through each part and what some examples of what fits into those categories could be?
For sure. I'm going to start with asking. And asking is asking the right people in specific, relevant ways and inviting them to solve a problem. So this might look like direct mail. It might look like email campaigns. It might look like a campaign put together. This might look like your monthly giving conversion or a lapsed donor reactivation, or it could look like the work that you're doing towards building legacy, like that emailer had told you the other day. So that is asking and getting those put in the calendar. Celebrating, thanking every donor for every gift profusely. And we love the language of celebrating. Obviously, we're thanking donors, but the idea of celebrating, we think of people who are choosing to take their money and do something, make change in the world and do good things. Those are people worth celebrating. And so we love that language of celebrating. So this might be the personal calls you do when you get a gift, or postcards, or thank you emails. Maybe you're doing a phone-a-thon. You're spending a day. Or we know one organization, they took 2 hours out of their day and everyone just called a bunch of donors and they thanked them. And that was amazing. Maybe you're sending texts. Maybe you're sending a quick short video, just a personal video to say, hey, Mike, your gift was able to help build this, serve these meals today. And so that's one of the ways that we can celebrate as we build that into our year. And then reporting. I think when people hear report, they often think of an annual report. And while an annual report can be helpful, and that is something that is good for various reasons to have in your organization, I think it's important to think of sort of micro reporting and reporting back to donors specifically on the gift that they gave. And I know there's often a lot of pushback around what does that look like, because sometimes it's a really big project or it's hard to report back, but there are creative ways that you could find that you can be able to give donors the information on the gift that they made so they can know that when they gave, they're actually doing something with that money. So this might look like an impact report or a donor impact letter. Sometimes we send a letter and we just have a picture that either was printed out at Walmart or looks like it was printed out at Walmart, and it's, hey, we broke ground on these classrooms that you're helping build. Here's what you're doing. Sometimes it's an email or an in the moment kind of as it happens update. So those are some of the ways that we can report back. And the ask, celebrate, report part of the flywheel, we want to make sure are happening at least 3 times throughout the year. 4 is great if you already have some momentum, but those are happening. And then a little maybe less frequently, but also essential to make sure that's happening each year, is that you're listening and engaging with your donors. So listening is both the qualitative and the quantitative part of your data. So this is going to look like maybe a donor insight project. So you want to find out what is going on in the hearts and the minds of your donors. Maybe you're doing a survey or you're doing some data analysis. So you're actually looking at what are people giving? What are people saying based on what they're giving? And so you can pull data and make a picture from that. And we know that numbers and quantitative data on its own is kind of a fuzzy, low resolution picture, and that hearing from people is also kind of a fuzzy picture. But when we put them together, we get this really HD picture of what donors are thinking and what they're saying, and it really helps us to be able to listen. So those are some of the listening things. And then engaging. And this is, we talk about engaging about it's building two-way conversations. So it's opportunities for donors to engage with you as an organization. And then it's also for donors to be able to engage with one another, which is something else that can be really beautiful when it looks like building this momentum within your organization. So these might be a mission aligned event. So maybe a bowling tournament is mission aligned for you. Maybe it's not. There might be some ways to make sure that the events you're doing really tie into what the work is that your organization is doing. A town hall, or just doing stuff with donors, finding ways to gather donors together and to spend time together. And we're seeing a lot of sort of smaller gatherings. These smaller events can be really effective. So rather than the big 300-person gala, 10 people together or 20 people together, these smaller events are something that can really help engage with donors in a really meaningful way.
Yeah. I've told this story many times before, but one of the best events that we ever put on, it was an event we did not put on at a previous workplace, which is we had this lunch and learn for donors to come. And this was the place that served people experiencing homelessness. And on the fourth floor, we put on a nice dinner and some people were wearing suits and it was all very like fancy. And a few days later, we get this gift and this note from these two elderly ladies. They just had such a good time and they thanked us for it. And we're like, wait, they weren't there. They had our RSVP, but they didn't come. Well, they just went to like the main floor and they stood in line for in the soup kitchen for their meal, and they had sat down with some of the guests of the place and had just had a lunch, and they had just had the most lovely time, which turned out to be the most on mission event that we could have put on without even knowing. All right, so we've got these 5 parts of the flywheel: listen, engage, ask, celebrate, report. The last step is actually pretty easy, which is just putting together a plan, actually putting this on paper. And you can do this. You can do this on one page. We have something called the One Page Fundraising Plan. It sounds fancy. It's not. Um, we we have some pretty big clients that just run off a one-page fundraising plan, believe it or not. And it's just, this is the way it looks. I'm going to describe it to you, and you can do it in Excel, or you can do it by hand, or you can do it in Word, whatever you want to do. Here's the way it works. On the y-axis, so going down from top to bottom, you just write listen, engage, ask, celebrate, and report, one under the other. Those are your 5 categories. And then across the x-axis, so going left to right, you just list all the months of the year, January through December. And then you just draw some straight lines around it. And now you've got a table where on one side you've got 5 categories, and on the other side you've got every month of the year. And just for every month, start plotting in at least one activity. At least listen, engage, ask, celebrate, report. Every month you want to have something in that box, because cash flow follows calendar. Caitlin, you've been doing a lot of things in the Fundraising Academy. We've got 2 minutes left here. Do you want to give us a quick rundown of what the BuildGood Fundraising Academy is?
The BuildGood Fundraising Academy is this middle ground place between a course and an agency. So with BuildGood, we work as an agency, often with a lot of clients where we do fundraising for them. We get the flywheel going for them. And we also know that out there's lots of courses and lots of information. And if you want to be able to access everything for free, you can do that out there. But the Fundraising Academy is sort of this middle ground place between those two, where we help train you to be able to do your fundraising. And it has been so much fun to see the results that people are getting from this. And I think one of the really fun things is people can actually bring an appeal that they've written and they bring it to us and we're able to help coach them to make it better. And they come with questions. I have a gala coming up and how can I actually help people engage? And we can help answer those questions. So it's this community. It's a community of practice if we're getting super technical. And I love to nerd out about these things where people are coming together and learning. So we have trainings and we have a preloaded year. So we spent 2 hours running through some of this information in the academy, and people came out with a full plan. They have their full year planned already because they set aside that time and they worked through it together. So the Fundraising Academy is a place where people can come and build their own fundraising muscles, where shops can keep their internal team, because so often there's amazing team members, but either they can be kind of lonely and not know what to do, or when they have questions, they there's so much information out there, and so often things are kind of conflicting. They have a community of people, and they have our team, our Build Good team, where they can come and bring those questions and have, I guess, trustworthy answers that will
Yeah.
bring them towards amazing fundraising. So it's a
Yeah.
beautiful place, and it's so fun to see the momentum that our members are getting there.
And we're doing stuff together. That's the best thing. Like we're doing stuff together. Appeals, newsletters, surveys. People are posting it. Our team is in there giving feedback. We've got weekly Zoom calls where we like face to face on the screen walk through stuff. And if that's something that you think might be interesting to you, if you could have a little bit of support in your corner, you can go to buildgood.com, and there's a way to schedule a call there, and we can walk you through more of it. We've been a little bit quiet about the academy. We've been running the flywheel. We've been doing a lot of listening and engagement, but now it's time to ask. Now it's time to ask y'all to join, come in the community. Pull up a seat around the campfire. There's a bunch of organizations in there already. We're coming up on a full year of having launched the academy quietly, and we think it's at a place where we can invite a lot more people. Some people wrote about this exercise, the preload year in the academy. They posted saying, I love being able to plan alongside my other Fundraising Academy colleagues. I'm feeling on a roll now. This year, I'm going to be brave and bold with some of the pebbles. I'm going to do more listening and more engaging. Our two quick question survey worked out so well last year that I'm excited to try it again and level up. Plus, we'll be doing 2 town hall events, which are my favorite to host. So people posting wins. It's awesome to see. Everybody posted their 1 year fundraising plan, and we'd love to have you be part of that. So, Caitlin, thanks for coming on the pod. This was awesome. Will you come back sometime and tell us a little bit more about what's going on in the academy?
Absolutely. You can't stop me from talking about the academy. It's so fun to
Right.
see what's happening in there.
Cool. Well, that's all for today. Here's my short action plan for you after listening to this. Make a one-page fundraising plan. 5 categories down one side: listen, engage, ask, celebrate, report. 12 months on the x-axis across left to right. Fill out those boxes. Get something in every box. Put it up on the wall. Put it where you can see it, where you can stare at it, where it's looking at you in the face every single day. And do the same with the New Year reset. Those 5 questions, go download them in the show notes of this podcast. Put them up so they're staring you in the face every day, so you know what to do more of, what to do less of. As always, thank you for hanging out with us around the fundraising campfire. If you like this podcast, if it's been helpful to you, if you've learned something, we're doing a special little promotion. And if you're still listening, that means you're a real one. You're a real fan of the show if you're still listening by this point. So if you leave a review on Apple Podcast, I'm not sure if Spotify already allows you to leave reviews, but Apple Podcast for sure, or wherever you can leave a review for the podcast, leave a review, screenshot it so I know it's you. Email it to me at hello@buildgood.com. Include your address, your home address, and we will send you a handcrafted, small batch, one of a kind Build Good mug. It's a campfire mug. It's beautiful enamel. It says gather around the fundraising campfire. This is the item in your mug collection you didn't know you needed, but that you want. You want to have this thing. It's limited edition. So please do it. If you want that mug, write a review, send it to me so that I know who you are and where to send it to, and we'll get that shipped off to you right away. So if you're listening to this, you're my kind of people. I'm your kind of people. Thank you for the work you do. I'm your host, Mike Dirksen, cheering you on as you build good in the world.